All right, great. Well, I hope everyone can see that okay. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Jo Sanchez. I am the grants manager here at the National Council on Problem Gambling. I manage our agility grants process and application, and have been doing so for the past 3 years. So very familiar with the program and really enjoy being able to connect with applicants and provide guidance where you need it. For those who are not familiar with the National Council on Problem Gambling, and a reminder to those who are familiar, our vision is to advance well-being by minimizing harm from gambling problems. Our mission is to lead awareness and advocacy efforts to reduce gambling harm. I do want to note that NCPG takes a neutral stance on gambling, meaning that we are not for or against legalized gambling. Our purpose is to advocate to mitigate gambling-related harm. I'll go over our agenda, but first a few housekeeping items. I do want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Agility Grants webpage so that you can come back and access it after today's webinar if there's anything you missed or want to revisit it for any questions that you might have afterwards. If you do have questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A function to put your questions in, and I will address all questions at the end. All right. To briefly go over our agenda, we are going to start by providing an Agility Grants overview, talking about the background of the program, what the goals of the program are, our eligibility and grant guidelines. We'll go over the geographic scope, share a few examples of past projects that have been awarded funding, and then I'll go into talking about the application review process. After that, I'll speak to you directly about actually applying for a grant and kind of walk you through how to do so, let you know what the process and timeline is for this fall 2026 grant cycle, and just give you an overview of what the application sections are and some recommendations for completing the application. And at the end, we will have some time for question and answers. So Agility Grants offers funding to nonprofit organizations, empowering them to implement as well as expand problem gambling prevention programs in their communities. It is the first ever and only program to offer grants on a national scale that are specific to problem gambling prevention. It is made possible with funding through the NFL via the NFL Foundation. So we're very grateful for their support. We have had other funders, additional funders to the NFL in some rounds, but our primary funder is the NFL via the NFL Foundation. And more than $1.5 million in grants have been made since the program began in 2022. There are 3 primary goals of the Agility Grants program. The first is to prevent and reduce gambling harm in young people by supporting effective, tailored problem gambling prevention education initiatives created and implemented by nonprofits that live and serve in their local communities. The second is to support projects in communities that have previously had no problem gambling prevention services or very little problem gambling prevention services, as well as to expand services to new populations and new audiences in communities that have had effective but small services. And the third is to amplify the voices and leadership of people from historically underrepresented communities where gambling harms are often more prevalent. To be eligible for an agility grant, essentially the basics are you must be a US-based nonprofit organization, meaning that you are designated by the IRS as a 501c3 public charity. And that 501c3 designation is very important. I know that there are other nonprofits out there that have a different kind of IRS designation, but we can only provide grants to 501c3 public charities. If you are a higher education institution, there is Typically a 501c3 associated with your institution, either a foundation or something else. And so you would want to go through that avenue to be able to apply for the grant. So you'd want to work with that 501c3 designated department within your institution. The other main thing about eligibility is just want to emphasize that you do not have to be an NCPG member. NCPG is a member association, but both members and non-members alike are invited to apply. Membership to NCPG does not factor at all into the application scoring and grant determinations. The reviewers for the grant applications are not even made aware of whether the applicant is a member or not a member. Agility grants also will not be provided for any of the following. These are pretty standard fundraising campaigns, individuals, lobbying activities or political campaigns, or community needs assessments on a wider scale. So grant guidelines. Proposed projects must focus on problem gambling prevention specifically. Projects that are focused on treatment or recovery will not be funded. That's very important. Projects should target populations at higher risk of developing gambling problems. This can include middle school, high school, and/or college students, youth athletes specifically, Black, Hispanic, Native American, Asian, and other communities of color, and other communities that are disproportionately impacted by problem gambling. We do leave this, purposely open to be able to hear from the community and from the applicants that are doing on the ground work as to, what are the populations that you're working with, and what are their needs when it comes to problem gambling prevention, and what is really how they are affected by this. So, please, if you have a group that is not specifically, if you're serving a target population that is not specifically listed here, it'll just be important in your need statements to really describe how this group is underserved or at greater risk of developing a gambling problem. So project activities must be implemented within a 12-month grant period. So we're accepting applications now, but the grant activities that you are proposing should take place between January to December of 2027. It does not have to take place throughout that entire time, but it does have to take place within that time frame. So when you are putting in your timeline into the grant application, just make sure that you are using that time frame to describe what activities are taking place. Grants are awarded through 2 funding cycles each year. We do a round in the spring, we do a round in the fall. Applicants may not apply in consecutive funding cycles. So this is our fall 2026 round, and that is because grants are distributed in the fall. If you applied in our spring 2026 round, then you are not eligible to apply in this round. We do an eligibility check, and your application would be automatically disqualified, but you'd be able to apply in the next round. Funding may support new activities such as pilot programs. We love pilot programs. We fund a lot of those. It can also go towards the expansion of proven strategies that are either reaching new audiences or new populations, extending, of course, the groups that you are serving with your problem gambling prevention programming. It cannot, however, be used to just sustain the current activities and the current programming that you are doing. And then applicants may request between $20,000 and $40,000 in grant funding. So that means, you can request up to $40,000. That is the max you can request for. And if your budget justifies that, if your programming justifies it, then absolutely do so. But we don't make grants for less than $20,000. So if you have a program that is needing less support than that, this may not be the right opportunity for you. And then agility grant funding may be combined with other sources. We recognize that $40,000 may not be the full amount of funding that you need to implement your problem gambling prevention project. And so we don't have any rules about being the only funder funding this project. If you can leverage other funding resources as well for your program, then we definitely encourage that. And so just know that we'll ask to see where the Agility Grant funding request is going towards, but it does not have to be the only source of funding. It also can be your only source of funding. That is okay too. And then no more than 15% of the total grant request may be allocated to indirect costs. So those are costs that are more administrative in nature for your overall, nonprofit operations. So it's like the administrative or executive staff time, facilities and utilities, the technology that is sort of more towards organizational operations, and sort of general office costs. If you have questions about that, you can always feel free to reach out to me. So we want to ensure that applicants are really aware of, what we mean by saying that this program is, focused on problem gambling prevention programming. So this is a definition that we're using, program strategies and policies to reduce gambling addicted related risk factors, especially among youth and others who have had little or no exposure to gambling. So eligible projects must focus on primary or secondary prevention, primary meaning designated to minimize harm among those who have not yet gambled, and secondary meaning, designated to minimize harm among those who have limited gambling experience here. Projects can't be focused on tertiary prevention. So those are the projects that are helping reduce harm and support recovery for those who already struggle with gambling problems. And what's really important to note here is that your target is what your target audience's experience and engagement is with gambling. If you have questions on this, again, happy to provide more clarity based on your specific program. And we can talk more about the resources we have later to, reach out to me and get support. So want to emphasize some activities that are not eligible for Agility Grant funding, just as examples of what we've seen in past proposals that fall into those ineligible activities that I've previously described before. So some examples that we've seen that are not eligible are hiring of staff that provide counseling to those who are in recovery from gambling addiction, training for mental health professionals to gain credentials related to problem gambling treatment, expansion of gambling addiction or problem gambling call support line, PSA campaigns promoting existing services to treat those with an active gambling addiction, and campaigns promoting safer play among those who are already gambling. So this is an exhaustive list, but just some examples of activities that are not eligible because they are not falling within our definition, the definition we have for problem gambling prevention programming. These are things that are more related to treatment, recovery, and responsible gambling for populations that have already been highly exposed to gambling and are already interacting in gambling behaviors, or may already be already have an identified gambling problem or an unidentified one. Geographic scope of our previous grantees, we make grants throughout the entire U.S. and so far to date, we have funded 49 different projects across 24 states and Washington, D.C. You will see that there are some areas here that are still gray. While we do not put, in our review process, we do not, necessarily weigh applications coming in from states here in gray higher. It is, of course, a goal of the program to be providing resources across the U.S. and expanding the resources that are available across the U.S. So we do love to see when there are applicants coming in from places that we haven't provided funding yet for. And of course, if you see on here a place where your program is taking place, what we encourage you to do is to go to the Agility Grants website and go to where you'll see our past recipients and take a look at the other programs that are happening in your region so that you can see where there are opportunities for collaboration or resource sharing, and just ensure that there isn't a duplication of efforts. So I'll go over a few examples of projects that have been funded in the past. Here we have some examples of projects that are working with middle school, high school, and college youth as their primary target audience. The Matcha 2G project by Nico's Chinese Health Coalition in California launched a pilot prevention programming that was targeting middle school age youth in San Francisco. There was a focus on Asian American students through community and school-based strategies. They developed youth-friendly curricula as well as family resources addressing gambling harm and gateway behaviors such as video gaming. So really targeting it towards what they were seeing youth engaging in. And then they also expanded the project through a second grant to include a youth leadership component and a peer education component. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln received a grant to develop and expand a centralized campus-wide problem gambling prevention program that was coordinated through the Alcohol and Other Drug Education Office. They created prevention presentations, a dedicated website, and a year-long calendar of prevention messaging and activities. And they targeted high-risk student populations through tailored and student-focused prevention programming, including intramural sports, Greek life, and other culturally based student organizations. These are some examples of projects that were specifically working with student athletes as their primary target audience. Volunteers of America, Oregon led a campaign called Don't Let the Game Play You. They conducted focus groups with student athletes to assess their gambling exposures and attitudes. They engaged college student athletes in co-creating prevention messages. They developed digital, audio, and print prevention materials. They worked with the student athletes, colleges, and marketing companies to disseminate the gambling prevention resources throughout Oregon, and they produced a student-led PSA that focused on the risk of sports betting specifically. And then the program, Let's Talk About Problem Gambling by Envision Partnerships in Ohio. They developed an intergenerational problem gambling prevention curriculum for youth athletes, coaches, and parents. They piloted that program and refined it through focus groups with student athletes, coaches, and parents. They collaborated with academic evaluators and state agencies on developing that curriculum, and then they partnered with local schools and youth organizations to deliver the curriculum. And they increased gambling literacy and skill building using SAMHSA's 8 dimensions of wellness framework. So there was definitely an evidence-based component to their programming. And then these are examples of projects that were targeting other high risk or underserved communities as their primary audience. So we have the Hmong Problem Gambling Prevention Program in Wisconsin, which addressed the lack of publicly available problem gambling prevention materials in the Hmong language. It conducted youth focus groups to identify where there were gaps in knowledge and what topics would be a priority to cover. It supported 6 youth leaders to develop bilingual Hmong and English prevention videos. And then it supported the dissemination of youth-created materials through weekly programming for adults, youth, and elders, as well as through social media to spark community dialogue. So this is an example of an organization that is a trusted voice and a trusted resource among the Hmong community, who was delivering a program specifically for problem gambling prevention to that community. And then we have Mas Vale Prevenir que Curar in New Jersey. This project implemented a culturally and linguistically appropriate problem gambling prevention campaign for Hispanic youth and families. They disseminated prevention messages through Spanish language TV segments, social media, and trusted community locations. They trained young adults promotores to deliver education on youth gambling risks and prevention strategies, and they conducted community education sessions with pre and post testing to measure learning and comprehension. So those are just some examples of projects, so you have a better understanding of what other organizations have been doing. There are many, many more examples on the Agility Grants webpage. If you go to our previous grant recipients, I encourage you to take a look at those web pages. So let's get into the actual, one more thing to cover is what does the application review process look like? So applications are reviewed by, NCPG Agility Grant Program staff, as well as an external panel made up of experts on problem gambling prevention programming. Those experts come from different areas in the field. Some have implemented problem gambling prevention programming in their communities. Some come from research backgrounds, some come from evaluation backgrounds. So it is made up of a variety of professionals who all have experience and expertise in different aspects of problem gambling prevention programming. Every application that is received is reviewed closely by reviewers, and proposals are looked at for strength in the following 5 areas: organizational capacity and effectiveness. So this is really looking for, strong organizational leadership, financial stability, a positive reputation in the community that it serves, sufficient staffing, and a previous record of successfully implementing programming and managing grant funds. The next area is strategic fit with the grant making priorities. So this is really looking for alignment with the Agility Grant Program goals that I mentioned before, and that the project is focused on prevention at the primary or secondary level. The third area is project feasibility. So this is really trying to understand, is this project doable within the grant programming, based on the timeline that is being proposed, based on the staffing that has been dedicated towards this project, and also based on any partners that are committed to the project. And then impact and evaluation. So really looking at what is the potential short-term and long-term impacts. Has the organization thought through the evaluation methods, and does it really make sense for the project that they are proposing to deliver? And then lastly, we have the budget and the effective use of grant funds. And really looking to see, has the organization thought through all of the project expenses, and are they in line and detailed enough to understand, if they really are eligible uses of grant funds. And then as well looking to see, does the grant requested cover everything that they're proposing to do, or do they need additional funding sources? And if they do, is there a plan to be able to garner those additional sources, or to be able to implement the program should they only receive Agility grant funding? Okay, now we'll actually go into more of this particular grant cycle. So our timeline for the fall 2026 grant cycle, the application period is open from July 8th through August 19th. So applications are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on August 19th. There is training and office hours that are available to assist applicants that I'll talk about a little bit later. Grants will be reviewed by our review panel between August 20th and September 20th. They'll evaluate all proposals and will make final determinations, and we expect to make award notifications in October. We will provide notifications to every applicant on whether or not their proposal was accepted for funding or not. For those proposals that are provided a grant award, the implementation period will begin January 1st of 2027 and goes throughout, the 2027 year. We do a mid-year check-in call with grantees, so that will happen around July 2027. And then for reporting, we require an end of year written report that is done in our online grant system, and that is due 1 month after the grant period ends. So that will be due January 31st of 2028, which is crazy to say 2028. It just doesn't sound right now. Okay, so getting started with the grant application. So if you go to the NCPG Agility Grants webpage, there will be a link there to apply for a grant, and it'll take you to our secure grants management platform called Open Water. When you get to Open Water, you will want to log in using your membership account credentials. So I mentioned before that NCPG is a membership association. So there are many organizations that already have a membership with NCPG, and it does link to our grant system so that we can, make sure there's a secure login process. But you don't have to be a member. You would just need to create a free guest account. And so there are instructions when you get to the web page on how to create that free guest account, and then you'll just come back to the grants page and log in using your new credentials. From the Open Water homepage that you see with the screenshot here, you can also download a preview of the application on the sidebar. So if you want to take a look at what the fields are before you actually start working in the online system, that is a good way to do so. It's a PDF format, but you can, of course, take those questions and start to create a draft in Word like many applicants do that you can then copy and paste into the online application. And then if you have any issues with logging in, don't hesitate to contact me. I will be sure to, troubleshoot your issues as quickly as possible so that you can begin your application. There are 6 primary sections of the grant application. So those are indicated through these tabs on the top of the application. The first one is an eligibility questionnaire. So those are a few questions to just confirm that you meet the eligibility requirements. If you answer something in that section that signals that the application or the project or the organization is not eligible, then it will not let you go through the others area of the application. We want to be sure that nonprofit organizations who already have limited resources as it is, are not, putting their very valuable time in completing an application that is ultimately going to be deemed ineligible. If you have questions about eligibility, again, feel free to contact me. The next page after that is your contact information. So there are oftentimes multiple people who are involved with completing a grant application, and then people who are going to be more involved, of course, with the project implementation. And so the contact information is really meant as a place for you to provide the contact information for the person who we should contact if we have questions about the proposed project. When you log in, it logs your applicant details. So that could be the grant writer or anyone in your organization. And then, if the person we should be reaching out to, if we have questions about the project specifically is different, the contact information page is where you can clarify that. Then the next page or the next section is organization information. That is really asking questions about your organizational level information, things like your mission, history, leadership, those kinds of things about your organization more broadly. And then there's a section for your specific project information. That is where you'll include all the details about the project that you are applying for funding. And then there's a section for your financial information where it is meant to gather information regarding your organization's financial information as well as your project budget. And then the last section is really meant to gather supporting information. There are fields for you to upload additional supplemental documents should you wish to be able to provide more information about what your organization is already doing or the proposed project. So a few tips and tricks for the application. You can add other collaborators easily, meaning that more than one person can be in the system working on your application. There is a Manage Collaborators button at the top of the application that you click on, and it'll walk you through adding a collaborator to work on your application with you. The quick navigation bar are where you'll have different links to the different sections of the application, so you can toggle between those sections. The system does autosave for you, so you should be able to toggle through those without your information being disappeared. But I always just encourage you to save often because technology is not always the most dependable thing. Definitely encourage you to read the prompts under each question. Those offer additional instructions and helpful context for you to know specifically what we are asking for in each of these fields. And then also pay attention to the character counts. There are word and character counts on multiple fields. We have extended those on, based on feedback we've received in the past to ensure that there's enough space for you to provide detail about your project. But we do limit it because we get many applications that our reviewers have to review. And so we want to ensure that our reviewers are able to really give attention to each application. So there are multiple uploads and attachment fields within the application. There is a project model, a project logic model that is required, and we do provide a downloadable template within the application. That template must be the format used for your logic model. And I'll talk about that a little more in the next slide. Partner letters of support. If you have indicated that there are partners working with you in this project, then these letters of support are required. There's a template also provided within the application should you need an example of a partner letter of support that you can customize and use, but you do not have to use that template. That is just, to provide a resource if needed. Partner letters of support do not have to be formal agreements from your partners. What we are looking for here is really having an assurance that this partner, knows that you're applying for this grant, that they have been engaged in conversations with you, and should you receive support, would partner with you in delivering or implementing or developing this program. Just want to note that it does not have to be that formal agreement. We understand that there are, several reasons why you may not be able to get that formal agreement yet, but for the project feasibility component of what our reviewers look at, those letters of support really do help for reviewers to understand, is this organization definitely going to be able to partner with these partners that they've listed? Organizational documents that are required include a 501c3 verification letter, a list of your board of directors, and your logo. And then financial documents that are required include your IRS Form 990, your most recent one that you have available, the organization's annual budget, and then, of course, the project budget. We do have a template provided within the application for your project budget. I do encourage you to use that budget, but if you have your own format, by all means, you can use that. What I will note is just make sure that you are providing sufficient detail in every line item so that the reviewers really understand where the funds are going. So instead of saying this is going towards consultants, really, in the budget detail, explain like who are you consulting with and what is the role of each consultant, things like that. And again, if you have questions on that, I'm available to answer questions. And then there are supplemental attachments. Those are just optional. Those can include things like photos, videos, examples of content that you have for other projects that are similar to the project that you're proposing, curriculum, anything that you think can further help support your application. We give you space to attach. So a little bit more about the required logic model. The reason why we require in our format is because this is really a tool to help your organization at every stage of your project. Whether or not you're applying for an agility grant, a logic model is a useful tool for your project. It will help you to create a clear program strategy and plan. It will help you in managing your program and staying on track throughout implementation. And it will serve as a basis for program evaluation after your program is implemented to really understand what were you trying to achieve? Did you achieve that? Why or why not? We do have resources available if you need more help or support in completing your logic model. We do, of course, provide this template to you, which is based on best practices with logic models. So if you've already developed a logic model, you can probably easily input it into this template. We also have a program evaluation webinar that is posted on our Agility Grants page that talks about evaluation strategies in general, as well as the logic model, creating logic models more specifically. And then we also have one-on-one coaching sections with a project evaluation expert that you can also schedule through our Agility Grants webpage. Okay, and so a few additional recommendations for your application. So ensure alignment with program goals and grant guidelines, of course, so that you are not putting valuable time and resources to submitting an application that will ultimately be deemed ineligible. Review those application fields early. So go into the grant application portal and go briefly through the entire application or download the preview of the application so that you can plan for any documents or attachments that you may need to compile from other departments or areas within your organization. Definitely stay aware of the character limits. While the fields do count down the character and word count, it actually will let you go to the next page, even if the character count is over. But at the end, when you press submit, you will get an error and will have to go back to correct any place where you've exceeded the character or word limit. So just, stay aware of that and stay aware of the countdown when you are completing those fields. Align your ask within the grant range. So just make sure that you are requesting between $20,000 to $40,000, that your budget is what you've requested. We've actually often seen budgets that the total amount is different than the request amount, and then there are questions from the reviewers. So just ensure that your project budget and what you're requesting from Agility Grants specifically matches with what you have indicated in the ask request field within the application. And then make sure again that you're providing sufficient details on budget line items for the reviewers to really understand where those funds are going towards. Focus on impact and use the program evaluation resources available to help you complete the logic model and the evaluation sections. Those are the resources I shared with you regarding the last slide. So that is, the evaluation basics webinar that we have on the Agility Grants page, as well as the one-on-one technical assistance coaching sessions by an evaluation expert. Differentiate your program. This has become a very popular program, and we are receiving applications from organizations who are all implementing very specific problem gambling prevention programming. And when you're working with similar audiences, such as at a college or a university, then those programs can come across as very similar to reviewers. So make sure that you are tailoring what you are proposing towards the specific needs of the community that you are working with, and also detail like why your project, why now, like what differentiates not only your project but you as the appropriate organization or the best organization to be implementing this program. And then leave extra time in case you experience any unexpected technology issues. So of course, just recommend that you do not wait until 11:58 on August 19th to press the submit button. Definitely try to do it at least a day in advance, just to make sure that you are not going to come across those issues, because I am not checking my email at 11:58 p.m. And then just a link again to those resources that I shared before. So these are all accessible via the Agility Grants page. That's at ncpgambling.org/agility. You can also scan this QR code and it'll take you there. That page does have a link to where you can schedule office hours with me. I'm neutral in the grant review process. I do not submit scores on applications like our grant reviewers do, and so therefore am able to support you with any grant application questions that you might have. So please feel free to schedule office hours with me if you want to discuss your project in more detail or have specific questions about application fields. Again, we have our Basics of Program Evaluation webinar recording linked on that Agility Grants webpage. And then we also have the individual coaching and technical assistance sessions that are available. Those are limited. Those we have contracted with Dr. Matthew Corser, who has been providing technical assistance and evaluation for this program since the start. I highly encourage you to take advantage of those sessions to talk through your program and evaluation strategies. And they are limited, so I encourage you to go on and book those sessions so that you ensure you snag one. And then if you have any questions that can easily be answered over an email, please feel free to send them to grants@ncpgambling.org. Those will go directly to me, and I'll respond to you. If you have any issues logging into the grant portal, also send that to grants@ncpgambling.org so that I can help you troubleshoot those issues. Okay, and we will go into questions and answers. Let me stop sharing my screen real quick. Okay, let me see if we have anything in the Q&A. Okay, we do have a question of, would paid student staff time work for that? So paid student staff time can be included as an eligible expense in your project budget. We'll just, of course, want to understand, what what work the student is doing specifically towards the project. But yes, that's fine. And if there's something more specific to that question that I didn't answer, feel free to pop it in the Q&A box, or if it's really specific to your organization or project, you can schedule some office hours with me. How many applications are typically received in previous years? What percent of those applicants received funding? So the program has gotten more and more popular. In the last few years, we've received, well, in the last few cycles, I mean, we've received between 35 to 45 applications and typically fund about 5 of them based on the funding that we receive. So, as I mentioned before, we're an intermediary funder. So the amount of grants that we're able to award is based on the amount of funding that we have available for the program. So typically we're awarding, 5 to 7 grants in any grant cycle. Okay, I'll give it a second in case anyone has additional questions they'd like to pop into the Q&A box. I will say that there are frequently asked questions on the Agility Grants website. If you do have a question, I would recommend checking out our FAQs first. And then if it is not answered in those FAQs, please feel free to reach out to me. And also feel free to schedule office hours to me. I will be holding office hours up until the grant deadline day, August 19th. I think the Office Hours Inc. Does have like at least a 12-hour period for you to be able to schedule an office hours. So if you think you're going to need help on August 19th, make sure you schedule that by August 18th. Well, that is it. Thank you again for joining the webinar. This will be recorded and posted, so please feel free to visit that Agility Grants webpage if you want to come back to this webinar and also to see all the other resources there. So thank you again. Have a great day. Bye.